Welcome, welcome once again to the Radical Imagination. I'm your host, Jim Vrettos. America has had a long and proud tradition of individuals who have stood up and found ways to alert the general public of unethical, brazenly illegal actions, corruption, and secret plots by political, economic, and military elites to hoodwink and sabotage our democracy. Ralph Nader in the 1970s, in his work on the abuses of the auto industry, coined the term whistleblower. Upton Sinclair is another example. In his 1906 book, The Jungle, exposed meat packing corruptions and conditions. Pierre Buxton exposed the unethical study of the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. Karen Silkwood exposed nuclear power plant violations. Mark Felt, also known as Deep Throat, was an FBI official who secretly aided journalists during the Watergate scandal. Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden, Daniel Ellsberg in the Pentagon Papers, police officer Frank Serpico, exploring and exposing police corruption in New York City. The list goes on and on. Today on the Radical Imagination, we discuss another courageous individual, Justyna Rzewinski, an activist, forensic social work advocate, and a former clinical supervisor in Correctional Health Services at Rikers Correctional Facility. She's been working to radically reform and build a transparency that doesn't exist in that world. She is trying to expose the inhumane conditions and abuses of so many mentally ill patients at Rikers. I welcome also Mac Muir, who I've gotten to know only in the last several months, but who's become a fast and true friend and comrade. His work on police accountability is absolutely fabulous. He's an activist. He's an author of a terrific new book called Cop Cop, Breaking the System of American Policing. He was a supervising investigator of the New York City Civilian Review Board, Complaint Review Board, and the executive director of Oakland's Police Review Agency. So welcome all to the Radical Imagination as we discuss the corruption and inhumane situation we find throughout our criminal justice system, but specifically for today's show at Rikers. So thank you again, all of you, very, very much for being here for this wonderful, important show.
Thank you.
So, Justyna, we all met at a meeting a few weeks ago to shut down Rikers. And I know you were on my wife's show, the Ask Beatty show, and you just blew me away with your story, and I had to have you on the Radical Imagination. So tell us a little bit to get us started personally about yourself, how you got in this field. Again, I'm not, I spent some time in the social work school, but I'm not familiar with what forensic social work is. So tell us a little about your own background and how you got into this work.
Sure. So I went to John Jay College of Criminal Justice for my undergrad, and my major was forensic psychology. So I was always interested in like working with people who are incarcerated. There was nothing that like ever happened in my life that made me want to get into this field. It's just like I always knew like this is what I want to do. So when I graduated with my bachelor's, I enrolled in Hunter College School of Social Work to get my MSW. And even then, like I knew like once I graduate, like I want to work like in a jail or prison. I remember when I was in John Jay, I did a class, an internship class, and my internship was in a Manhattan Psychiatric Center on Ward's Island. And the third building is Forensic Kirby, and I wanted to be there so badly. Like I even asked my supervisor if he can like arrange a tour, but and he asked them, but they were like, no, we don't do tours. Like, people have to get clearance and everything. So I always knew that like I wanted to work with people who have like been incarcerated, committed serious crimes. Like I said, there was like nothing that like happened in my life. It's not like I had a close family member or someone be incarcerated. It's just something that I was always interested in because I
Hmm.
always believed that like, people like even in their worst moments can like change. So when I
Justyna, can I
graduated,
just interrupt you for 1 second? I'm just curious. Did you take a course at John Jay with Dr. Kobylinski, who is probably the most foremost forensic thinker at that school? He's
yeah,
unfortunately
I
passed.
don't remember. I
Okay.
don't, yeah.
Okay. Just
I
curious.
graduated in 2008, so
Right.
that was a long time ago. So I don't remember, but they have a lot of great professors there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And when I graduated, I worked in an organization like for a year with children and families, but like I knew that's not what I really wanted to do. But it was like my first job, and I was only there for a year. And then um, I started working in another organization, and it was for people who are on parole, mainly people who committed sexual offenses. And I just remember like when I was doing my internship and I was talking to another intern and she said, "Oh, the one population that I could never work with is like people who commit sex offenses." And I was like, "Oh, I think I could work with them. Like, why not?" So I started working there and I was there for like 10 years and I moved up to
Hmm.
be a supervisor, a director, and I loved it. I loved working with people who just came home. Like I had clients who did 20, 30, 40 years, and it was just a really, really rewarding job.
What did you love about it? What really struck your passion?
I think that like I was able to like meet these individuals and they were different than like what society thought they were. And like it was really inspiring how much they overcame. And like I said, it was just completely different like what the media shows you. And um while working there and working with people on parole, I always thought I was going to do clinical work, but then like I saw like all these rules and laws that are put in place that really don't help people reintegrate. So I decided to enroll in a PhD program and I wanted to do like macro social work, like policy work and like change laws. So then I saw a job opening for Rikers and I was like, you know what? If I'm gonna work on criminal justice reform and I've never have been incarcerated myself, I need to like work there and see how it is on the inside because I always thought like, I don't want to say like I'm an expert in this field and I know about incarceration and I've never like even worked in a jail or prison. So I only took the job just to get that experience.
Hmm.
And I moved up to like every role possible in my previous job. So I knew it was going to be tough. Like I told people I'm going to work on Rikers and they're like, "Are you crazy? Like that's the worst place to work for." But, I was told like I'm going to be working on the mental health units, which are different and these are like specialized units and it's not bad like general population. And like I said, I just really wanted the experience. I just wanted to say like, yeah, I worked in the jail prison, like I know what's going on there. And that's how it started.
Hmm. Well, you had quite an experience, right? So,
Something that I never imagined
tell
going
us a
in.
little about that.
Yeah, so I was the clinical supervisor of the mental health units in GRVC. So on Rikers Island, there's few facilities. So GRVC is the facility for the highest classification and it has the most mental health units. So I was a supervisor of one mental observation unit, which had 50 guys, and then a supervisor of the PACE unit, which only has 38 guys, and more mental health staff. And, quickly, what I saw happening there was I saw how my patients who were severely mentally ill were being locked in their cells for weeks and even months. And when somebody was locked in their cell, they're not coming out, like they're deadlocked. That's what the officers would refer it to as deadlocking. And in New York, there's a law that there's no solitary, and especially for people with mental illness. Like this is something like you just don't do. So the officers never documented this, but what they would do is in the bubble where they had the control panel and it had buttons to each cell door, they would put a white piece of paper on that button so that whoever came later or the next day would know this person's deadlocked, don't let them out. They had a white tag. Like that's how they communicated. And people ask me like how long do I think this has been going on for? And it had to be for years because when I got there, like everybody knew what the white tag meant. And this was in every mental health unit. Sometimes I had to cover for my coworkers. And like we talked about it in meetings, the deadlocking, and like all the officers knew what the white tag meant. So it had to be going on for years. And there were times where we could really advocate for the patient to come out. But we would have to like wait for specific officers. So like we knew, okay, this officer is working today. We're not even going to ask her because she's going to say no. Let's wait for this other officer to come. Hopefully they come tomorrow and we're going to talk to them and we're going to like ask them to like take somebody out of the cell. So it was like a lot of strategizing. And I wrote in the Marshall op-ed that, I had one individual who was severely mentally ill, um, also HIV positive, so he was not getting any of his medications. He was able to come out for a week. He did okay. Something happened over the weekend where he looked at a female officer inappropriately in a sexual manner because he would stare. And she felt uncomfortable, so they locked him back in. And now I come to work on Monday and he's screaming and tearing up his mattress in rage. So, like, all the progress that we made in a week where he was taking his medication every day, he's back to being locked in. And, like I said, they didn't get their medications because the medication would come on the floor. So the patients would have to line up to get their medication. If you're deadlocked, you're not coming out.
Mm,
And like I said, these people had serious mental illness. So they would bang, scream. And what was just most like horrific was the smearing of feces. A lot of times the officers would cut off the water because they would flood the cell. So they would smear the cell in feces. And it was so bad that there were times I couldn't eat lunch in my office because I had an office on the unit because I could smell the feces. So I can't even imagine like living like that. And like this is how they woke up in the morning. This is how they went to sleep. And this is how they ate their 3 meals a day in a cell filled with feces and flies everywhere. The other people that were detained there, they would like come up to me and be like, Justyna, we need to do something. Like, look what they're doing to this person. Like, this is just insane. Like, there has to be something done. So I was only there for 9 months, and quickly I realized that like I can't just stand by and watch this happen and not be able to like do anything to help. And like I just quickly noticed that like whatever progress that I make with a patient, like I'm gone the next day, and then it could just go back to square one. So I knew that like any little small progress I make, like it could be like all damaged the next day.
So I think a question that pops up immediately is, let's assume this has been happening for many years. It appears to be socially institutionalized at the place. There's systems to cover it up, let alone execute the game plan. Why did it take so long for this to come to light?
I have no idea. People ask me that. And, when I decided to come out with this and I spoke to like the lawyers who helped me with getting scheduled to testify and contacted me to the reporter, like they asked me, like, think about if you want your name out there. Because when people Google you, like, this is what's going to come out. So, like, I took a few days to think about that also because, like, I have a child, like, retaliation. And there was like a moment where I was like, why am I doing all of this? Like, why don't I just leave Rikers and like forget about it? But then I was like, no, I can't like forget about my patients. So I think people who like leave, I think they just want to forget it.
Well, in terms of not just the character, the reputational issue, were you concerned about retaliation?
I was because I really didn't know like what DOC can do. And like, now you can like go online and like Google people and find their like address and phone number and everything. So I was really, really scared. And I remember when I was taking the pictures for the Daily News, the photographer was like, "Oh yeah, they're gonna probably call your new job and like try to get you in trouble." And I was like, "Oh my God."
Yeah.
And like this was on a Saturday and the story was gonna come out on Tuesday. And I'm like, my God. And then like I called the lawyer and I was like, "Do you think they're gonna do this?" Like, so I really didn't think that the story was going to be as big as it got. So I think I was like maybe in denial. I remember saying to my mom that like the officers on the floor are not going to find out about this because they don't read the paper. And then like my friend called me the same day and she's like, Justina, I walked in the jail and everybody has the newspaper and is talking about you. So I think like when I was doing it, like I didn't really realize like the impact it would have.
You had a meeting with the warden, right, about all of this? You,
No.
you weren't able to. So
No, I mean
none
my
of the higher ups would.
supervisors, like everybody knew, like we had meetings, we would talk about it,
Right.
in the meeting. So like my supervisor, the director of mental health, like, obviously she had meetings with people on top in DOC and like they knew what was happening. But no, like I wasn't ever able to like have a meeting with the warden and say anything.
So Mac, is that similar to your experience and your work to a certain
No.
extent?
I mean, right. I think it's different to the extent that this is a known practice that you've got folks covering up from the public and from oversight, right? And that's what jumps out for me is where's the Board of Correction fit into all this back then, right? Rikers inmates can file complaints, and the Board of Correction ostensibly has some role in the oversight of Rikers, and you also have federal monitorship. What's your assessment of those entities as and how that intersects with like this culture that seems to be willing to prevent oversight from even becoming aware of very serious, dangerous conditions?
Well, the Board of Corrections, they said they knew this was happening. So, like, after I testify, I watch every Board of Correction meeting. Sometimes I still go to them, but it wasn't the meeting that I went to. It was like a few meetings after where this was brought up, and the chair said, what did he say? And I have it written down somewhere where he said to like DOC, like, every time I go there, like, I always tell you, like, this is a problem, this deadlocking or whatever you're doing. So, like, they admitted that they've seen this happening. And when I was working there, like a supervisor told me that like a long time ago, I think maybe before COVID, like Board of Corrections would come there regularly, like once a week, and would say like, "Hey, do you like have any issues?" And like if any people were locked in, like the person from the Board of Corrections would go to that unit and like tell the officers, "Hey, you need to let this person out." But he said to me that they haven't been there in a long time. I mean, I've been told they're like understaffed and like we've advocated for like more people to be hired so that they could be more like present on Rikers. But I remember when I was working there, that's when I found out about the Board of Corrections. Like I didn't even know they existed before working there. And like I looked up like I went online and I saw how like they prohibit deadlocking. And I was like even saying to my coworkers, like, I wonder if they ever come here. Like I would like to speak to them, but I never saw anyone come. And sometimes there were some people that came, but they came like for a few minutes and then they like left. So
Uh,
like, yeah.
Well, you've previously talked about being thinking about having an anonymous complaint and then being concerned that you'd brought it up in enough ways internally that it would just come right back to you. What
Yeah.
was early on? You say like everyone knew, and I know that experience too, right? Working in a bureaucracy, you pretty quickly assess like, oh, everybody knows this bad thing happens and is used to it, and that's just how business works. how are you introducing that information? And then when you or your questions, and then how does that get shut down internally?
Well, like I said, we all knew we would talk about it, but like a lot of the staff were okay with people being locked in. And
Mm,
like I would always voice my concerns and sometimes go back and forth with them. So that's why I was scared that like if I do make a call, they're gonna say, "Oh yeah, Justyna probably called because she's always like saying something about it." Because
mm,
there were moments where like someone exposed themselves and like the staff was like, "Yeah, good. He needs to like stay there for a long time." And stuff, and like we would kind of go back and forth about it, so like I always like spoke out against it, so that's why I was like scared that like they were going to be like, just you called.
and moving out of the specifics of what happened then and your attempts to change things, I understand there's a Department of uh, investigation taking place. Can you tell us anything about that? What the scope might be, or what you've heard?
So I haven't heard anything. When I have reached out to them, they said that they can't tell me anything because the investigation is active. I did meet with them when this came out. But then I was watching like a meeting they had, and they basically like they weren't talking about me, but they were just talking about someone making a complaint because like I didn't go straight to them. To them, I'm not a whistleblower, so they wouldn't share information with me about the investigation because, like, I went to the media. They didn't say this directly to me. They were being asked questions about, like, when people make complaints, and they said that, like, if somebody goes directly to them, then they are a whistleblower, and then they would communicate with them about the investigation. But I
Mm,
didn't go directly to them.
mm,
Um, I didn't even know they existed, honestly. I really did not know they existed until I testified, and in the meetings it was said that like DOI was contacted, and then I did my research about them. Like, so I didn't even know that I could contact them. Like, I didn't even know DOI existed. I'm embarrassed to say, but I really didn't,
I think that's
and like
common.
and I heard them talking. This was like at a city council hearing that they have, that like they go into like agencies and organizations and they tell people about DOI and how to make a complaint. They never did that with me in Rikers. Like I said, I did not know who they were until they contacted me.
Which is a fascinating contrast because I know city employees and other agencies who hear from DOI, you get a training on if you got a whistleblower complaint, here's how to approach it. We certainly did when I was working for the city.
No, and I was working for New York City Health and Hospitals. I was working for the city and nothing. Like I said,
Wow.
and maybe if I knew about them, I think I probably would contact them.
Well, you've gone through the process of being a whistleblower, going to the media, you've got a DOI investigation taking place, and this huge issue being out in the open. Do you think it's stopped?
There's one person that I talk to that works there because everybody else stopped talking to me. They're mad. Even the mental health staff is mad at me because they unfortunately faced retaliation. I was told that like when I left and this came out and they would go on the unit, the officers would say, "Oh, here come the snitches. We knew we can't trust mental health." But obviously, like I didn't want that to happen, and I didn't know that was going to happen. The person did tell me that they have this tracking system, so like New York City Health and Hospital CHS, that like in their notes, like they have like some tracking system that like if somebody's like locked in for more than 3 days, like the supervisor's being notified. Like I was told it's not happening as it was when I was there, but I really don't know. But in August of 2025, there was an individual, Mr. Arded Bila, who died on the unit that I was supervising. He wasn't my patient when I was there. He wasn't there, but it was my unit. And the preliminary investigation came out that he was found dead in his cell with feces everywhere on his face, naked with his head in the toilet. And this is the PACE unit, which is the program to accelerate clinical effectiveness, specialized unit that like only 38 people can get in, and you have to have a serious mental diagnosis to be on that unit. So
Mm.
this happened just in August. And the report says that he wasn't coming out of his cell for days. That the CHS worker came out and spoke to him for a few minutes and sprayed air freshener.
Wow.
Right. So typically, what is the training, if any, about mental health among the officers? And
None.
also, what do you feel
None.
the power of the union is? Is
Yeah.
that something you have to really take into account for the lack of progress here?
Yeah, I mean, I think they do a huge disservice that they don't train these individuals. And I asked officers, like, hey, have you received any mental health training? Because I was curious in the beginning, because these are specialized unit, and they said no. A long time ago, a few years ago, when the PACE unit was formed, they did get training. And I heard it was actually like a really good training. It was like a whole week training. They did role plays and they did it with CHS. They haven't done that training in years.
Yeah.
So there's officers who don't know about mental health. Um, I think the like one of the biggest problem is the officers don't understand mental health. If somebody is disrespectful, curses them out, they would come to me and they would say, send him to general population. He's not really mentally ill. And the individual was mentally ill, maybe higher functioning, but had a serious mental illness. And I wouldn't send these people to general population. And because I didn't, there was a lot of tension with me and these officers because they would take it so personal and they wouldn't even talk to me. I would come on the unit to say good morning and they looked the other way because they were so angry that I just don't want to send someone who's severely mentally ill and had an ACT team in the community to general population. So, they think that like people with mental illness are like very low functioning, like and, they like to dictate to us what to do. Like, I'm sorry, like, they're not the professional. They have no knowledge, training in mental health, but yet they would come to the supervisors and they would say, send him to GP. He doesn't belong in this unit. He's lying. He's manipulating, all of those things. And, yeah, they need more training. They need people that are trained. They need people that are trained in de-escalating. And that is what I notice. A lot of times they escalate the situation. They will say something to the person detained. The person detained gets upset, responds back, and then it just turns into a fight. Like I remember once on my PACE unit, there was a new officer, not a new officer, but it wasn't a steady officer to the unit, but an officer came to cover the unit and like the way he spoke to the guys there, like I was so impressed and he was the only officer on the floor and you always need two officers and he was like playing chess with them in the middle of the unit and there were no incidents the day and it was because he knew how to de-escalate and he knew how to speak to them. And then I like told the mental health unit chief, I was like, can I please have him on my unit like every day? Like he's amazing. And, there were no issues. So a lot of it is like they take things so personal. Like, for example, there was one incident where an individual cursed out a female officer, so they locked him in for a day, and he's mentally ill. And linen exchange came, and another officer is asking her, like, hey, so and so is asking, can he get his linens changed? And she said, F that, he ain't getting shit today because he cursed her out. So it's just like,
So,
like they just take everything so personal. And I think they just need to like, I had patients curse me out. I had patients say not nice things to me, but I always thought like, okay, like they're sick, they're in jail, they're mentally ill, like I'm able to go home. They're not, like they're in a crisis. Like, yes, I'm gonna address with them and I'm gonna tell them that's inappropriate, but like I'm not gonna like take it out on them and be angry because like these are really like sick individuals who need help.
well, it seems like, again, as you're pointing out over and over again, what's lacking is a vehicle through which you, the mental health people, can talk to the correction officers and work together. And
They
both,
do work together. So I noticed because I was like, how do people stay working there? And what I notice is they stay working there when they go along with what the officers want. So if you don't go along with what the officers want and you're not going to send someone to GP, they're going to create tension for you where now it's uncomfortable for you to work.
You're
And
talking about the
people,
mental health workers now.
yes, and
So that
people don't want that. So people go along. So the officers like send him to GP and they'll send the person to GP because they don't want a hostile work environment. And to me, I was like, I'm not because I know this person's not going to do well in GP. Like I can't.
So,
yeah.
so you do have what I'll call a trope, but for COs, I mean, I've heard this from COs that, and we see it in the media as well, that you got to assert dominance as a CO. You got to not let anybody disrespect you. If you let somebody disrespect you, you get caught slipping. How did you see that? Right, this appears to be, a logical consequence of that type of behavior accelerated and built upon over years. How else did you see that happening in A? And then B, how do you think that you break that up more than just trainings? Because hey, I'm all for de-escalation, but the idea that in order to get people to be in your environment, you need to dominate them, I think is something that's another level up.
Yeah, I mean, it all starts from the top. Right? So like, and I was asked about this many times, what about the supervisors? I mean, the supervisors, in the white shirts, they have to make rounds, I don't know how many times per day. They saw what was happening. I even had a captain look for me once because there was a patient who used to be in my MO unit and came to my PACE unit, and he was locked in for 3 days. When they let him out, he assaulted another patient. A captain that I've never spoken to me was looking for me, pulled me to the side and was like, he should have never been on this unit. You're bringing all the problematic patients, and he's not really mentally ill because he knew how to fight. And I was like, what? I could not believe what he said to me.
That's wild.
That is
I
wild.
was so upset and I emailed my supervisor. Like emailed her a long email and I'm like, I'm sorry, but I'm like so upset. Like this captain is telling me that I'm bringing all the problematic patients because MO, it's GP, then it's MO, and then it's PACE. So like whoever had to go to PACE and who was in my MO unit would go to my PACE unit because I already had that relationship with them. So a lot of the clients that would come to the PACE unit, a lot of the patients, I would tell the staff, oh, I know them from my MO unit. So the captain was like, you're bringing all these problematic patients. And I tried to explain to him, like, no, they're supposed to be in PACE. So if they wouldn't end up in our PACE, they would be in another PACE, but we have them coming to mine because I already know them. And he's
Mm.
like, well, yeah, he knew how to fight. He said he took a fighting stance. So he knew what he was doing.
To follow,
So that's what's important. It's like not just the training, but like they need like that supervision and that like oversight. And like for the supervisors, when they see somebody locked in to like intervene, they would come on the unit and they would make their round for a few seconds and they were gone.
Mm.
and what do you think, both Mac here and Justyna, about attempts to create a greater professionalization of correctional officers? That is more that they get more respect, more money if they take courses, for example, that presumably, well hopefully, because you're not there now, but somebody like you would be teaching,
Hmm.
and that the officers then would see that people also care about the dead end jobs that they are doing. All
Yeah.
right, we as a society just throw these people away and behind bars, and we don't see anything. We don't care, and the officers know that, and they know that they're at the bottom of the totem pole here. So it seems like we're dealing with all kinds of hurt feelings here.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
I
like,
did feel bad for some of the officers. Some of them I had a good relationship and we would talk and stuff. And like I did feel bad for them because they would tell me how like, if they have their child's school event and their coworker doesn't show up, they have to stay and do the shift. So like a lot of them were really like burnt out. They would tell me that they don't get support from the supervisors. And I think, the lack of training, being burned out, somebody maybe is difficult acting out, so it's easy for them, like, let's just lock this person in. and then it just escalates and escalates. So I think, definitely, something needs to be done with the union because I know they have like unlimited sick time. So like a lot of people call out. So then the officers that are there get stuck doing 3 shifts. And like they would talk to me, they'd be like, we have no life. We don't see our family. So I think like if there was a better work balance and the proper training and like support for them, I think, they would do a better job.
And of course, the question is this the place to put so many mentally ill people?
No.
Prison is not, is right. I'm not sure that prison should exist in any sense, at least at a punitive level. If you're going to restrain people, then make that prison into a humane therapeutic environment. So it's become the dumping ground.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was in Albany on Tuesday with a coalition, and we were advocating for the Treatment Court Expansion Act, which is a bill in New York State. And what this bill would do is it would expand mental health courts. So right now in New York, we have Brooklyn Mental Health Court and we have Manhattan Mental Health Court. If you get arrested in Queens, you're going to jail. You're not getting into a mental health court because there's none in Queens. So what this bill would do is it would expand those mental health courts. So people with serious mental illness, with substance use, they would be going to mental health court. And people think, oh, that's like, being soft and like, it's a like just so that people don't want to go to jail. But no, like they have to participate in a program. They meet with the judge every week. They have to take their medications. If they don't, then unfortunately they will end up in jail. But it is giving them a chance to like do well. And there's been a lot of success stories. One of the individuals that's part of our coalition completed mental health court, and like he has a city job now and is like really successful. And there could be so many people like that, but when we put them in these settings, and I always say like even if it's the best jail or prison, it's still a jail and a prison, and that's not where people with mental illness should be. And I was talking about this on Tuesday that like all of my patients that I met on Rikers Island, like all of them told me that when they got arrested, they were homeless and not taking their medications. I never met one patient who was like, yeah, I was on my medications and I had a good place to live. No, all of them were like on the streets, homeless, not taking their medication. So it is really like a mental health issue.
So right now, Zoran Mamdani's been elected. He's proposing this Department of Community Safety. Um, what are your thoughts on that? And then what's one piece of advice that you would give to the people who are putting that together?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great idea because, we know that there's incidents where like the police responds and it is a mental health crisis and it goes terribly wrong. So I do believe that like there needs to be trained professionals that are responding. Like I know when I worked in outpatient and there were times where I had to call the police because the patient was a danger to themselves or someone else. Like I kept telling them like this is a psych emergency. Please come with a social worker, you know? So like I think that's a really good I really like the idea. I think that could be effective. And like he said, the police can focus on like real crime and not like, they're called to deal with mental health crises. I mean, we have a mental health crisis in New York City. Advice, I think definitely like, trained professionals and like people that are like doing this work, I think need to be included because there are so many people that also had mental health crisis, like the individual I spoke about. And like he knows how to like talk to people, that are going through the same thing as he knows, like he said that he was in and out of jail and then back to the streets. So I think like involving like people with lived experience is so important. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for Mom Dami. I don't know if you're aware, like there was when the law got passed to like limit solitary confinement, Mayor Adams would like sign off that executive order every 5 days. Mamdani did resign it, but he said that he's giving DOC 45 days to come up with a plan of how to implement the law.
And that's to end solitary confinement in Rikers Island. An
Yes,
exciting development.
So,
yes. So far he's doing what he said he will do, so that's exciting.
what is again, we all met at the closing Rikers meeting. So what is the status now of this? We've been hearing about this for I don't know how long,
Yeah, so we were really
Where are
excited
we?
that Mayor Mamdani got elected because he was the only candidate that agreed that like Rikers needs to close. And he did say during his debate that like we already went into contracts. So like if we would pull away, it would cost the city so much money. So we just, we're waiting for the jails to be built and then the population has to go down because the new jails, I think only like 4,000 people are able to be there, and right now it's like 6,000 something. So passing like the Treatment Court Expansion Act would also help with lowering the population. So it's not just like, let's close Rikers, but there also needs to be like a solution, like how do we decarcerate and like get the population lower? And
Well,
then, mhm.
oh, please.
And then another bill that I'm working on, I'm part of a coalition called Social Workers and Allies Against Solitary Confinement. And this bill is really important and personal for me because what this bill would do is it would require that all healthcare professionals working in a jail or prison would become mandated reporters. Because I couldn't believe that when I went to Rikers and before Rikers, I knew that if my client is being abused, I'm calling the Justice Center. I had a training in that. I had to sign a paper that I was trained and I had to call them a few times. I went into Rikers seeing all of this and not knowing who to call and not being given any information on who to report this. And I, take like my profession very seriously and my code of ethics. And I'm like, I'm a mandated reporter and I'm seeing this happen and I can't call to investigate. I couldn't believe it. And I really think that like if that bill was in place, I would probably still be working on Rikers because I would have reported this. I would have felt good that I did my job and they would have investigated. But I really, the reason why I decided to leave is like, how am I gonna like stay here, watch this happen and be a part of it and not like say anything? So
Hmm.
the bill is really important, and you probably heard of Robert Brooks, the individual who got murdered in the New York State prison. So his son is a part of our coalition because his son got very involved in criminal justice reform. And his son said that, like, he believes if the bill was in place, his dad might still have been alive because somebody would intervene. And they murdered his father in a medical office. The Marshall Project did an investigative report where they found that most assaults happen in medical offices because there's no cameras. So that's where the officers would take people. And there were two nurses standing by watching this happen.
Wow.
So we think that this bill would really change the prison culture. Like it wouldn't, get rid of all the problems, but like the officers wouldn't be able to take people to a medical office or assault people in front of nurses because they would know that this is the law and it's going to get reported.
Well, that's a big step.
So
Absolutely.
hopefully 2026, these two laws get passed.
Now they need to go where city council and
No, it's the state. So it's the
state.
senators, assembly, and yeah, the whole process. The Treatment Court Expansion Act is really close. They were really close last year. We're not that close, but we have support and we have great sponsors for the healthcare bill. We have sponsor Julia Salazar and she's a great senator. So like we're hoping that, this is the year and we're meeting with senators. We're gonna go up to Albany in a few weeks to like advocate for this bill because and it also provides protections for people that work there where they feel like, they can do their job ethically.
Yeah. So are I know are you cautiously optimistic that these bills would get passed? I
Yeah, and the healthcare bill would
realistic.
be the first one in the United States. There is no law like this anywhere, which is so crazy. Like when we see a child being abused, we know we got to call ACS. But when we see people being abused in jails and prisons, we don't have to call anyone. And that just shows us like how society views people that are incarcerated.
Hmm. Yeah.
Well, so my question for you is you spent this time in Rikers and bringing it back to the conditions that are there, right? We talk about closing Rikers. What motivated me in the first place to advocate for that was just the conditions, not just of the people, although I knew folks doing similar work to you, but I first got involved post Sandy when the buildings were collapsing and you could grab a shiv out of the wall, basically.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, like, what did you see in terms of the conditions of these facilities? Because some people hear, oh, you want to shut down a jail and build others. What an empty cause. And as somebody who's spent time there, it's pretty jarring that there are people living in buildings like these, let alone being abused.
Yes. And we spent so much money to have someone detained there, and the conditions are horrible. The buildings are falling apart. Every time it would rain, I would walk into GRVC and there was a huge I like this huge crate where like people would put their linens in the middle of the hallway because there was water coming from the ceiling every time it rained. And I would see cockroaches and water bugs just dead on the floor and like the bathrooms, even for the staff. And, I mean, everybody's bathroom should be nice, but just the buildings are so old, they're falling apart. In the office that I had with my staff, a little bit of the ceiling was coming off, so we were always careful that the ceiling wasn't going to fall on us. Like, just horrible conditions. Horrible. The toilets for the patients would never work. There was always something, a problem, like just like old, horrible conditions. And that's obviously one reason to close it, but also like the island, like it's so far from everything, like getting on there is so difficult. And it is really like out of sight, out of mind. And when you are in there, you don't have access to your phone. And it really feels like you're in another world. Like the things that you see happening there, you're like, wait, is this like reality? And then you get out and you're like, did I just see what I saw? It's just like a completely different world. So I think like that Rikers needs to be closed, like that island needs to be closed. Like, so many family members complain how like far it is, the commute, getting there, the wait times. And like, and I think that's what they try to do, like out of sight, out of mind, like less access to it. But yeah, the buildings are falling apart.
It's a
I,
shame.
go ahead, Mac. Go ahead, Jim.
No, please, Jim.
Well, I want to ask you a very personal question, Justina. As we've gone through this show, I'm just so amazed at your courage, your integrity, and so on.
Hmm.
How is it? How how can we produce, socialize, educate more people who have the sort of just common sense goodness, ethical standards that you have? I mean, that how we see it all the time. People are just going along with all kinds of nonsense, and yet you just sort of naturally. I mean, as the greatest respect, you're bouncing around, and you say, "Well, I'm finding this, and finding. Of course, it's horrible. Blah, blah, blah." It's so natural that you do this, and it should be. So,
Yeah.
how can we produce more of you in
Yeah,
our
I think
country?
also, and this is what I tell, because I also teach, so I tell my students, because sometimes people think that like they can't make a change, that like the system is so bad that even if they speak up, they're not going to make a change. And, like I said in the beginning, I never thought this would get that big. And am I saying, did it solve all the problems in Rikers? No. But like, DOC is still being asked about it. There is an investigation. CHS had to do a new policy and thing. And then I was told that like when the commissioner found out because I testified on a Tuesday and the Daily News article came out on Tuesday. DOC was notified Monday night. She told everyone to release everyone from deadlock. And when I thought about it, I'm like, there's no one in deadlock in the whole GRVC because of me. Like, I was like, wow, I never thought that would be possible. And I remember it was Thanksgiving and I texted the lawyers and the advocates and I just said, I'm so thankful for you. And they responded and they were like, well, we're so thankful for you just, because right now your patients and so many others would be spending their Thanksgiving in deadlock. And like, I didn't even realize that. And I was like, wow, like what I did was like a big thing. People got out. Even if it was for that moment, like people are being monitored. They know DOC knows that people are watching, so they're trying to be on their best behavior. So I always tell people that like you should speak out, even if you think like your voice doesn't matter or like you're not going to make a change because change is possible and that's how we make change. But I think like people just have to like remember their ethics and like what's right and just yeah. I don't know. I mean, I know it's complicated. Like some people don't want to leave the job because it pays really well and they're afraid of retaliation. You know what I mean? But I think you just have to like always remember like why you started this work.
Yeah, I think it is actually pretty simple. You put it, there's a there's a right way, it's a decent way, and I think most of us know that, but we again, that's such a beautiful story. I think this is an excellent way of sort of wrapping up the show
Yeah,
here.
and I remember the day that I left, my patients made me beautiful cards, and they worked on these cards for a long time in their art group. And these cards were like colored with glitter, and they wrote stuff, and I couldn't believe they did this for me. And they wrote so many things, and I remember one of them wrote, like, "Thank you for being a light in such a dark place." So I always like remember that, and I'm always like, this is why I keep doing what I'm doing for those people that I left behind. And I promised myself, and they were like, because I already had this plan when I was there, because I gave them like a few weeks notice to leave. And like, there were times where like I wanted to tell the patients, like, oh, I'm going to do something about this, but I knew that I couldn't. But, there were so many times when we had conversations and they were like, this is horrible. And like, when I told them I'm leaving, they're like, you're abandoning us. And like, but I already knew like my plan and like I wanted to tell them so badly, but I couldn't. So like I, just promised myself that I'm gonna like continue to fight for them on the outside because I could do more on the outside.
You feel a little like that also, Mac, in your own work?
Oh, I mean, I think that, well, I'll build on an answer to this question, which is like, what's for you next? Like, what's the goal? You take the risk to your reputation. You got to go out in the media. You got to have these conversations. Like, what's going to happen?
I mean, I'm gonna continue to advocate. Like, this is my life. This has become my life. There is not one day that I do not think about Rikers, and there's not one day that I don't go on my phone and Google it to see what's going on. So,
Mm.
like, this is just going to be the rest of my life.
Yeah, and I mean, Jim, to
Mhm.
your question,
Yeah.
same thing. It's like once you dedicate yourself to a specific issue, for me, it's like police accountability and oh, for on my end, I think the big difference is like policing is in the public discourse in a much different way
Yeah.
than corrections. For me, like my system critique is we talk about policing in a way that creates an Ouroboros and then we don't actually have real change. Just having advocates out in the public on issues that are happening in jails and prisons is a huge difference because they can't be out on the streets.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Well, I admire you both very, very, very much, and um, I think that you exemplify the radical love that Cornell West talks about, and the radical imagination in building this transformative world that I think we all want very deeply. So thank you so very, very much, Justyna. All the best. You're going to be pursuing your PhD at Wurzweiler?
Yeah, I'm probably going to be finished by May. So I'm
Wow.
doing my
Well,
dissertation, and my dissertation topic is I'm doing a survey on social workers that work with justice impacted individuals to see what their knowledge and attitudes are about voting rights.
interesting. Interesting.
Yeah,
Wow.
because
Um,
in New York, once people get out of prison, they can vote automatically. But like a lot of social workers that work with them, they don't even know. And I found that like even my patients who were on parole thought they couldn't vote because they were on parole. And I think
Hmm.
voting is such an important part of reintegration.
it can make a big difference in
Yeah.
elections.
Yeah, so my
Yeah.
dissertation is national, so I'm getting like surveys from like people, social workers from all over the United States.
And I think it's not just the vote, it's the person's sense that they're actually connected to society again, right?
Yes,
You're
and they're like
participating
connected
in
to their
democracy.
community and they're a member of their community. I think it means so much. So, yeah, that's another area that I'm really passionate about, voting rights for justice impacted individuals.
Hmm.
Well, it's interesting. I've taught at two of the three schools that you've been at John Jay and Yeshiva.
Oh,
So, and
great.
I did in sociology, I did every semester take my criminology course to Rikers. But that's a whole other
Yeah,
foray, so-called tour that they would offer.
yeah.
Basically, but anyway, that's beside the point right now. But listen, all the best, really, and
Thank
thank you
you.
so very, very much for being on the show.
Thank you. It
And
was great meeting you all and connecting.
well, we'll
Well,
we'll
thank you,
still stay
Justyna.
connected
Yeah.
because
Yes.
it's very, very important with the work we're doing. And thank you again. All
Thank
the
you.
best.
Thank you. You too. Have a good night.
Good
Have a
night.
great one.
Have a
Bye.
great one. And thank you so very, very much again, once again, for viewing us here on The Radical Imagination. It's Jim Vrettos, your host, and Mac Muir, my co-host today. We'll see you again very soon next week on The Radical Imagination.